James Bond films once gave us danger, romance, and beautiful women who made every scene shimmer with elegance and mystery. But here is the twist no one talks about. Behind that beauty was a price far too high. Away from the cameras, many of these Bond girls faced failed surgeries, devastating illnesses, and sudden accidents. So what really happened to these women after the screen went dark? Join us as we uncover their names, their untold final chapters, and honor the legacies they left behind. Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. Miss Moneypenny, the quiet emotional constant of MI6 in James Bond, 1962, was portrayed by Lois Maxwell. At 35 years old, she first appeared in Dr. No, 1962. The character remained hers across 14 consecutive Bond films, an unprecedented continuity for a supporting role. The role ended a commitment that spanned more than 2 decades. Lois Ruth Maxwell was born on February 14, 1927, in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, and her professional life was marked by repeated displacement and frustration. After early acclaim, including a Golden Globe for That Hagen Girl, Hollywood's interest narrowed instead of expanded, pushing her toward European cinema. She worked relentlessly in Italy and Britain, appearing in films like Aida, 1953, and later balancing television work alongside Bond entries such as Goldfinger, 1964, and The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. Fame arrived, but creative control never did, and the pressure of being indispensable yet easily replaceable followed her into every production meeting. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the strain became physical. Maxwell was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, a disease that demanded invasive surgery and prolonged recovery. The illness drained her energy and forced a retreat from public life just as her Bond legacy was being celebrated anew. While audiences revisited her performances in Moonraker and For Your Eyes Only, she was quietly enduring hospital stays, weight loss, and chronic weakness, aware that her acting career was effectively over. The disease reshaped her final years into a cycle of treatment, reflection, and isolation. Lois Maxwell died at age 80 on September 29, 2007, at Fremantle Hospital in Australia, following complications related to cancer. She was cremated privately, without ceremony or industry spectacle. Her estimated $3 million estate reflected a lifetime of steady work rather than power or excess, closing the story of a woman whose on-screen composure masked decades of professional and physical endurance. Nikki van der Zyl as the voice of Honey Rider. Honey Rider, the voice audiences believed they heard in James Bond, 1962, was voiced by Nikki van der Zyl. She was 27 years old when she shaped Dr. No, 1962. Her contribution was foundational yet unseen. She continued providing voices and dialogue support across the franchise until Moonraker, 1979. Monica Nikki van der Zyl was born on April 27, 1935, in Berlin, Germany, and built a career defined by pressure without visibility. Her voice gave life to Ursula Andress in Dr. No, reinforced Shirley Eaton's presence in Goldfinger, 1964, and resurfaced across later Bond films, where accents and performances required correction. She moved from studio to studio under financial uncertainty, her work treated as technical necessity rather than artistic contribution. Over time, that invisibility took a measurable toll. Years of intensive studio sessions, emotional compression, and financial anxiety weakened her health as she aged. While Bond audiences continued to hear her work echoed in films like From Russia, With Love, and Moonraker, Nikki's own body slowed. She experienced long-term fatigue and declining resilience before suffering a stroke, the culmination of years of accumulated strain. Writing her memoir For Your Ears only became less a career move than an act of survival. Nikki van der Zyl died at age 85 on March 6, 2021 in London, following complications from the stroke. Her passing was quiet, mirroring the way her career unfolded behind the curtain. With an estimated $1 million legacy, she left behind a painful truth. Some of cinema's most enduring voices belong to those history almost forgets. Eunice Gayson as Sylvia Trench. Sylvia Trench, the woman who unknowingly created James Bond's most famous introduction in James Bond, 1962, was played by Eunice Gayson. At 34 years old, she appeared in Dr. No, 1962. The role placed her at the very beginning of a global phenomenon. At that moment, her face and voice became part of cinema history. Eunice Elizabeth Gayson was born on March 17, 1928, in Croydon, England, and her career was shaped by abrupt turns that left lasting scars. Originally cast as Miss Moneypenny, she was suddenly reassigned just before filming, a decision that planted early doubt about her standing in the production. Although she followed Bond with strong work in The Revenge of Frankenstein, 1958, and television staples like The Saint and The Avengers, the industry quietly narrowed its interest. Being labeled the first Bond girl became a ceiling, not a launchpad, and offers thinned as novelty replaced momentum. As the years passed, the emotional toll deepened. Stage work continued, including demanding productions like The Sound of Music and later Into the Woods, but the physical strain of performance intensified with age. While audiences endlessly replayed her early Bond scenes, Gayson faced increasing fatigue and long absences from the spotlight. Eunice Gayson died at age 90 on June 8, 2018, following prolonged age-related health decline. She passed quietly without public ceremony, leaving an estimated $2 million legacy earned through film, theater, and decades of Bond-related recognition. Nadia Regin as Karin Dor's mistress, and Bonita, Karin Dor's mysterious mistress in James Bond, 1963, was played by Nadia Regin. She was 32 years old when she appeared in From Russia with Love, 1963. The role was brief, yet unforgettable, placing her inside one of the franchise's most emotionally charged storylines. It was a rare moment of global visibility. Nadia Regin was born on December 2, 1931, in Niš, Yugoslavia, now Serbia, and her career unfolded under relentless pressure. Forced to rebuild her life across borders, she worked in Germany and Britain while battling language barriers and rigid casting stereotypes. Despite strong visibility in series such as Danger Man, Maigre, and The Saint, she was repeatedly confined to foreign roles, regardless of range or training. Even her later Bond appearance in Goldfinger, 1964, failed to open doors to leading parts. The frustration became exhausting. By the late 1960s, Regin walked away from acting entirely, drained by rejection and instability. She redirected her energy into publishing and writing, producing novels and philosophical works while struggling financially in the early years. The emotional strain lingered, and as she aged, years of stress manifested physically. Her health declined gradually, culminating in a stroke that marked the final chapter of a body worn down by decades of survival rather than celebration. Nadia Regin died at age 87 on April 6, 2019, following complications from the stroke. She was laid to rest quietly, leaving behind an estimated $1.5 million legacy from acting and publishing. Her Bond roles were fleeting, but behind them stood a life shaped by exile, sacrifice, and a strength that never made headlines. Honor Blackman, as Pussy Galore, the fiercely independent pilot in James Bond, 1964, was played by Honor Blackman. At 39 years old, she appeared in Goldfinger, 1964. The role made her instantly iconic. It was also her only appearance in the Bond franchise. Honor Blackman was born on August 22, 1925, in Canning Town, East London, and her career was built on constant resistance. Long before Bond, she had already endured years of being underestimated, fighting for serious roles in an industry deeply hostile to strong women. Her breakthrough as Cathy Gale in The Avengers, 1962 to 1964, brought fame, but also backlash. Critics called her too masculine. while producers tried to soften her image. Even after Goldfinger and major films like Jason and the Argonauts, 1963, and Shalako, 1968, she found herself repeatedly typecast or sidelined as trends shifted. The pressure followed her body as much as her reputation. Decades of stage and screen work took a physical toll, intensified by the anxiety of staying relevant in an industry increasingly obsessed with youth. In later years, while audiences rediscovered her performances in The Upper Hand and theater revivals like The Sound of Music, Blackman faced declining stamina and recurring health issues common to long-term performers. Aging did not silence her, but it slowed her, forcing her to choose her work carefully and conserve strength. Honor Blackman died at age 94 on April 5, 2020, at her home in Lewes, East Sussex, from natural causes. She was not buried in spectacle. Her exit was quiet, dignified. With an estimated $4 million legacy earned across 7 decades of film, television, and theater, she left behind the image of a woman who refused to shrink, even when the industry demanded it. Diana Rigg as Tracy Bond. Tracy Bond, the only woman James Bond ever married in James Bond, 1969, was played by Diana Rigg. She was 31 years old when she appeared in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969. The role carried emotional weight unlike any other in the franchise. Yet it would also mark a turning point filled with conflict rather than reward. Dame Enid. Diana Elizabeth Rigg was born on July 20, 1938, in Doncaster, England, and her career was defined by confrontation. After achieving explosive fame in The Avengers, she openly challenged unequal pay, an act that made her a target rather than a pioneer. Studios labeled her difficult, offers evaporated, and she was forced to rebuild through relentless stage work. Even after Bond, she oscillated between acclaim and exclusion, sustaining herself through demanding roles like Medea, which earned her a Tony Award, and later reinvention in Game of Thrones as Olenna Tyrell. The emotional strain eventually became physical. A lifelong smoker, Rigg suffered serious cardiac issues that required heart surgery, forcing her to slow down late in life. Then came the final blow. Lung cancer, diagnosed in early 2020. Despite the diagnosis, she continued working, completing roles while undergoing treatment. As audiences celebrated her sharp wit on screen, she was privately enduring pain, breathlessness, and the knowledge that time had narrowed. Diana Rigg died at age 82 on September 10, 2020, at her daughter's home in London after a 6-month battle with cancer. Her death was calm but devastating, closing a career built on defiance and brilliance. With an estimated $10 million legacy from film, television, and theater, she left behind a rare truth. Strength, when spoken too early, often comes at a terrible cost. Deborah Kerr, as Agent Mimi, the elegant intelligence operative in James Bond, 1967, was played by Deborah Kerr. She was 46 years old when she appeared in Casino Royale, 1967. It was a parody Bond film, lighter in tone but heavy in symbolism. The role marked one of her final major screen appearances. Deborah Jane Trimmer was born on September 30, 1921, in Glasgow, Scotland, and her career was defined by quiet endurance rather than scandal. After conquering British cinema, she crossed into Hollywood carrying the burden of expectation, graceful, restrained, proper. That image brought success but also confinement. Despite towering performances in From Here to Eternity and The King and I, she endured the humiliation of 6 Academy Award nominations without a single competitive win, a repeated near miss that deeply affected her confidence. Studios praised her discipline, but rarely took risks with her, leaving her trapped between admiration and denial. As the years progressed, the strain intensified. While she continued working in respected films such as The Innocents and The Night of the Iguana, her body began to betray her. Kerr quietly battled Parkinson's disease, a long, degenerative illness that eroded her strength and forced her withdrawal from the screen. Tremors, fatigue, and physical decline contrasted cruelly with the precision and elegance that had defined her performances. Even so, she continued selective work, refusing to be remembered as fragile. Deborah Kerr died at age 86 on October 16, 2007, in Suffolk, England, after years of complications from Parkinson's disease. She was laid to rest at Alfold Churchyard in Surrey, her grave marked simply, "Without spectacle." With an estimated $10 million legacy built from decades of classic cinema, she left behind a career admired worldwide, and a quiet sorrow for the greatness that recognition never fully repaid. Tanya Roberts as Stacy Sutton. Stacy Sutton, the geologist caught in danger in James Bond, 1985, was played by Tanya Roberts. At 36 years old, she appeared in A View to a Kill, 1985. It was her only Bond film. Instead of elevating her career, the role became another label she could not escape. Born Victoria Lee Blum on October 15, 1949, in New York City, Tanya Roberts fought a brutal transition from modeling into serious acting. Early promise in Charlie's Angels collapsed under poor ratings, and Hollywood reduced her to a sex symbol rather than a performer. Films like The Beastmaster and Sheena, Queen of the Jungle gained cult followings, but critical scorn followed her relentlessly. Even when she found late career warmth in That 70s Show, the industry still treated her as disposable, useful, visible, but never respected. Behind the scenes, her health deteriorated quietly. Years of physical roles, financial instability, and emotional strain weakened her body. In late 2020, a urinary tract infection progressed into sepsis, triggering multi-organ failure that overwhelmed her system. Isolated by pandemic restrictions, she deteriorated rapidly, her condition misunderstood even by those closest to her. The confusion surrounding her hospitalization mirrored the confusion that had long surrounded her career. Tanya Roberts died at age 65 on January 4, 2021, in Los Angeles after being removed from life support. Her death was tragically misreported hours earlier, adding shock to loss. With an estimated $10 million estate earned through film, television, and cult fandom, she left behind a painful legacy. A woman endlessly seen, but rarely truly understood. Cassandra Harris, as Countess Lissel von Schlauff. Countess Lissel von Schlauff, the tragic aristocrat in James Bond, 1981, was played by Cassandra Harris. She was 33 years old when she appeared in For Your Eyes Only, 1981. It was her only Bond appearance. The role burned brightly, then vanished almost as quickly as it arrived. Sandra Colleen Waits, professionally known as Cassandra Harris, was born on December 15, 1948, in Sydney, Australia, and her career unfolded under constant pressure to leap continents and expectations at once. Moving from respected stage work in Australia to international film, she faced a narrow window to break through in Hollywood. Appearances in The Greek Tycoon and Rough Cut suggested momentum, yet the industry never fully committed to her as a leading presence. Even as television exposure expanded through Remington Steele, she remained on the edge of stardom, visible, admired, but never allowed to peak. Then the body intervened. In 1987, Harris was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, the same illness that had taken her mother. Treatment cycles, exhaustion, and uncertainty began to dictate her life and work. Projects slowed, roles slipped away, and the emotional weight deepened as she fought to remain present while filming and caring for her children. The illness advanced quietly but relentlessly, compressing years of ambition into hospital rooms and recovery schedules that never truly recovered. Cassandra Harris died at age 43 on December 28, 1991, after a 4-year battle with ovarian cancer. Her passing was intimate, devastating, and far too early. With an estimated $1 million legacy from film and television, she left behind a Bond moment frozen in time, and the aching sense of a career stopped mid-sentence. Linda Christian as Valerie Mathis. Valerie Mathis, the poised companion in James Bond, 1954, was played by Linda Christian. At 31 years old, she appeared in Casino Royale, 1954. It was a television adaptation, not the blockbuster franchise yet. Still, history would remember her as the very first Bond girl. Born Blanca Rosa Henrietta Stella Welter Vorhauer on November 13, 1923, in Tampico, Mexico, Linda Christian entered Hollywood under a spotlight that quickly turned unforgiving. Branded by the press as the anatomic bomb, she was celebrated for beauty, while serious roles quietly slipped away. Early success in films like Up in Arms and Tarzan and the Mermaids brought fame, but the same image hardened into a trap, typecasting that reduced her opportunities just as the industry shifted toward younger faces. The long aftermath carried a physical cost. As the offers thinned, Christian endured years of instability and health struggles away from the cameras. Later in life, she battled colon cancer, an illness that drained her strength and confined her world after decades of public scrutiny. The contrast was cruel. A woman once marketed as indestructible glamour facing a private, exhausting fight for survival. Linda Christian died at age 87 on July 22, 2011, after complications related to colon cancer. With an estimated $5 million estate earned from film, television, and enduring pop culture recognition, she left behind a paradoxical legacy, forever first in Bond history, yet never fully freed from the image that defined her. Zena Marshall as Miss Taro. Miss Taro, the seductive secretary in James Bond, 1962, was played by Zena Marshall. She was 37 years old when she appeared in Dr. No, 1962. It was her sole Bond role. One appearance was enough to define her public image forever. Zena Moira Marshall was born on January 1, 1926, in Nairobi, Kenya, and her professional life was shaped by constant displacement and limitation. Entering British film after years of wartime performance work, she was quickly labeled exotic, a description that narrowed rather than expanded opportunity. After Dr. No, offers clustered around the same narrow archetype. Even when she demonstrated range in projects like Danger Man and later ensemble work in Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, the industry returned her to the same visual shorthand: mysterious, foreign, disposable. That creative confinement became a quiet burden. Roles slowed, momentum faded, and the frustration of being remembered for a single character overshadowed decades of disciplined work. While audiences continued to recognize her from Bond, Marshall worked intermittently, increasingly pushed to the margins of film and television. As her health weakened, she withdrew further from public life, carrying the weight of a career that had promised more than it delivered. Zena Marshall died at age 83 on July 10, 2009, after a battle with cancer. She was buried at St. Thomas a Becket churchyard in Skeffington, Leicestershire, without spectacle or ceremony. With an estimated $1 million legacy from film and television, she remains emblematic of early Bond performers whose fame arrived quickly and closed doors just as fast. Karin Dor as Helga Brandt. Helga Brandt, the lethal and unforgettable antagonist in James Bond, 1967, was played by Karin Dor. At 29 years old, she appeared in You Only Live Twice, 1967. It was the role that brought her global attention. It was not the role that brought stability. Born Catherose Dare on February 22, 1938, in Wiesbaden, Germany, Dor built her reputation in European cinema before Bond ever called. She became a recognizable presence through German crime thrillers and Edgar Wallace adaptations, then crossed into international cinema with Alfred Hitchcock's Topaz. Despite visibility, her career fractured between markets. too European for Hollywood permanence, too international to remain central in German film. Each transition reset her momentum rather than strengthening it. The strain followed her body into later life. Though she continued working on stage well into her 70s, a severe fall in 2016 caused head trauma that doctors initially underestimated. Dor pushed forward regardless, performing nightly despite headaches, exhaustion, and declining mobility. The effort accelerated her deterioration. By early 2017, complications deepened, her independence vanished, and she entered assisted care, an abrupt end to a lifetime of physical and professional resilience. Karin Dor died at age 79 on November 6, 2017, from complications related to the fall. Her estimated $3 million estate reflected a long, hard-working career across film and theater rather than superstardom. She left behind a legacy of endurance, an actress who kept performing long after applause faded until her body could no longer follow her will. Claudine Auger as Domino, the tragic, luminous woman caught between love and violence in James Bond, 1965, was played by Claudine Auger. She was 24 years old when she appeared in Thunderball, 1965. It was her only Bond film, one role that instantly turned her into an international symbol, yet quietly set the limits of her future. Claudine Auger was born April 26, 1941, in Paris, France, and her career began under the glare of beauty pageant fame rather than artistic credibility. Transitioning from Miss France World 1958 into serious acting was not seamless. It was brutal. Directors admired her presence but doubted her depth, and after Thunderball, she faced fierce competition across Europe, especially from actresses who were not burdened by the Bond girl label. She worked relentlessly to escape it, appearing in demanding productions like Triple Cross, 1966, alongside Yul Brynner and Christopher Plummer, and later in darker European cinema such as Black Belly of the Tarantula, 1971, where she deliberately chose complexity over glamour. Despite those efforts, momentum remained fragile. Hollywood never fully embraced her. Her voice in Thunderball had been dubbed, a symbolic reminder of how control over her own image was often taken away. Several projects promised more than they delivered, scenes shot, then erased, as happened painfully with the Eiger Sanction, 1975, where her entire performance was cut. These professional disappointments accumulated quietly, carving a career defined less by failure than by missed permanence, even as she continued working steadily in European film and television. In her later years, illness slowly overtook public life. Claudine Auger died at age 78 on December 18, 2019, in Paris after a long illness. She left behind an estimated $6 million legacy built from decades of film, television, and enduring Bond recognition. Remembered as one of the most emotionally resonant Bond women, her story is ultimately one of beauty that fought, often invisibly, for artistic survival long after the spotlight moved on. They dazzled the world, redefined glamour, and became part of one of cinema's most enduring legends. But behind the elegance, the danger, and the unforgettable Bond moments, many of these women faced lives marked by loss, illness, and quiet suffering after the spotlight faded. Their stories didn't end with the final scene. They continued in ways most fans never knew. Which Bond girl's story shocked you the most? And which one do you think deserved far more recognition than she ever received? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more untold stories from the world of classic cinema, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next reveal.